Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Hit the bell icon button so that you don't miss out any tutorial.
Hey everyone, welcome to HTML5 from scratch. We're going to be learning all about how HTML5 works and all the different technologies that work with HTML5 to become a web developer. So this course is going to cover a lot of things. We're going to cover HTML5, we're going to cover CSS, we're going to cover responsive web design, introduction to JavaScript, and how to deploy to the internet. We're even going to cover how to set up Git and use GitHub, which is an essential tool for all web developers. We're going to get into some more advanced things like animations using CSS. We're going to talk about and use CSS frameworks such as Bootstrap and Materialize and others. We are going to create several projects throughout the course, small projects to help us learn our skills, and then a bigger final project to build, which will be a professional portfolio with a working contact form that we are going to learn how to deploy using Netifly. And we're going to be even learning a little bit about the back end and how that all works using Git and GitHub. So even if you are knowledgeable about HTML and CSS and even a little JavaScript, this course is going to put everything together and you will, I think, get a lot out of it. So even though it is for anyone and it's for everyone, we are going to start at the very beginning. So if you have no prior knowledge of web development or coding, this course is for you. If you do know some of the HTML concepts and basic CSS and basic JavaScript, you can feel free to fast forward through some things, skip things altogether, but this is going to be a comprehensive course that will give knowledge and skills on how to put everything together all the way to the final deployment. So HTML was developed by Tim Berners-Lee in 1990. It's short for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's used to create web pages that are displayed on the web. You also can connect pages to other pages with hyperlinks. HTML5 was first introduced in 2008, and then it was stabilized, you might even say standardized, in 2014, and is the newest version of HTML. If you look into the history of HTML, there is some interesting things that happened from 2008 until 2014 that you can learn more about the standardization of it and how it evolved. Anyway, HTML5 uses the basic rules as older versions, but add some new tags and attributes, which makes it a lot easier. It's just easier than ever to create web applications. We are going to learn and use quite a few of the new HTML5 technologies. We are going to delve into learning about some of the advanced things like Canvas and SVG features, using audio and video and incorporating those things into our web page, and even look into web storage and local storage. Then we're going to be using some of the more common new elements like section, fig caption, nav, headers, footers, and then we're also going to be creating a contact form page on our final project and use a lot of the new input types. So here's an example of what the old version of HTML looks like when you begin an HTML page. And it has all the same things that HTML5 has, except it's a little messier. There's just things that we don't have to see anymore. It's not easy to read, it's not easy to understand. So let's compare it to the new version, the HTML5 version, which is a lot cleaner, easier to read, easier to write. So let's talk about some of the different things that you're seeing. So at the top, you're going to have a tag that says doctype HTML, and that is telling our browser that this is an HTML page. And then we have our HTML opening and closing tag. And we're going to learn that in HTML, we need to have an opening and a closing tag for everything. So what that means is the opening tag is a greater than and a less than and a greater than. And then the closing HTML is the less than / and then the greater than. And everything inside of that HTML tag is what encapsulates the HTML document. Then we have to have a head tag, and here's the opening head and here's the closing head. And then we have a body tag, opening and closing, and everything inside the body tag is what you see on the page. So it's what the user will see in the browser. The elements that are inside of the head are not seen on the browser, and I'll explain that when we start doing it ourselves. The things that are in the head are very important, but they're not something that the user is going to see. So for example, this is some information that, for example, your search engine bots are going to be reading to understand what the page has. It's going to have a title, and so your search engine bot will read the title, and then it might even have a description. And when you go to a search engine and you look up you do a search and you find some web pages, you often will you'll see the title and the description in the search engine the page, and then you'll know kind of, oh, do I want to go visit this site or do I not want to go visit the site? And that's where this stuff is put in. And then this meta tag here talks about the kind of characters that we're going to be using in this page. You also could have a meta tag that talks about the language that you're going to be using. And then you're going to also add some other things called link tags that are going to help us to link our style sheet to our HTML page. Now in the body, this is where the text and images are going to live, and this is what we see on the browser. And we're going to be learning how to write all these different elements. This is an H1 element, and this is a P element or a paragraph element. And H stands for heading, so this is a heading 1 element. And it's going to show these words with very large text. So H1 is the largest text that we can display. Whereas a paragraph tag is going to display this text as normal text. And there's all types of different elements that we can create on our browser and on our page. Now CSS is something totally different, and what it does is it makes the things that we see on the browser, the different elements, it styles those different elements and makes them more interesting to look at and more pleasing to see. So for example, with CSS, you can make your text different colors, different sizes. You can underline it. You can do all kinds of things to your text. You can center it on the page. You can do some animations to it. You can so when you add images to your page, you can center those images. You can move them around. You can make them circles, images instead of squares. You can add shadows to those images. You can add borders to those images, and same with any element. So your styling sheet is going to make your web page look beautiful. Now the cascading refers to which style rule applies if more than one rule matches a particular element. So for example, if at the top of your CSS page, CSS file, you make a rule that your H1 tag or heading is going to be red, then if later on down the page you make another rule that H1 is going to be green, then those are conflicting. So in the cascading version, the way it works is that the green one, the one at the bottom, is going to override the one at the top because it cascades down. So that's what the cascading refers to. And those things will become more clear as we get involved in CSS. A separate style sheet is best practice. So CSS is designed to enable the separation of your presentation and your content. So your content is brought about by the HTML page, but the presentation is brought about by the CSS file. And what this does is it gives you more flexibility, and it becomes easier to work through your coding. For example, if you have multiple HTML pages, they can all follow the same style from that separate CSS file that you created. There is a way to put your style inside the HTML page or inside the HTML file in your code, but it becomes very cumbersome and it just becomes very difficult to read, and your file becomes gigantic, and it's difficult to find things and to work with because it's so humongous, and you can't find anything anymore because you've got so much. The other reason it's important is the CSS can help you change the styling for different versions of your HTML. So if you are going to be writing for a mobile phone and a tablet and a desktop, you can use that separate CSS file to denote how you want your HTML to appear on the different sizes. And that gets us right into responsive web design, which is absolutely very, very important for today's climate with all these different devices that everybody's using. And we're going to learn techniques so that our apps look really good on all these different sizes. And that's what responsive web design is all about. And then we're going to do an introduction to JavaScript. JavaScript is a high-level interpreted scripting language. And we'll be building some small applications to learn basic JavaScript and to get some experience with how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript work together. So for example, if you're on a web page and there's a place on the page where you can input, as a user, you can input your name, your email, some more inputs, maybe your phone number, your address, and then there's a little button that you can click that says, hey, is this the same address as your billing address? Is this your shipping address? Is the same as your billing address? And then you say click yes. And then all of a sudden, all those inputs that you just put in for your name and email just automatically gets inputted into the other fields without you having to write them in. So that would be JavaScript powering that. Or let's say you're on a forum type of website and you can input some text and some different things, and you're as the user, and you click on a button and you add all that text to the page so that others can read it. So those are all the different kinds of dynamic things that JavaScript offers. So the materials that you're going to need for this course is just a text editor of your choice. So popular text editors are Visual Studio Code, Sublime, and Atom, and others. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. People refer to it as VS Code. And in our next video, I'm going to give you a tour of VS Code in case you decide to use it. You are very welcome to use any text editor, but if you've never used one, you might as well just go ahead and use VS Code, and then your experience and will be the same as my experience. So when we're coding together, it'll be easier for you to follow along. So that's it. Our next video, we're going to be starting to code. See you then. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're ready to start coding. I like to start on my desktop, on a fresh desktop, and begin with a new folder. So I'm going to right click on my desktop and hit new, and then go over to folder, and then we're going to title it whatever we would like. So since we're just doing some practice, I'm going to title this one Coding Practice. You may title it anything that you'd like. Okay, so now that I have my folder, I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code, and you'll see a welcome page, and you can either go to Open Folder right here under the Start menu, or you can go to your file and do the same thing, where you would see where it says New Folder, not File, Open Folder. You would hit Open Folder, and it's going to look on my desktop, and I'm just going to pick. So I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to pick the folder that I just created, which was Coding Practice, and then I'm just going to select that folder. So it's going to open that folder for us, and that's where our code is going to live. Okay, so here is that folder that we just created, and the welcome page, I'm going to go ahead and just delete it for now, just close it out for now. Okay, so now I have my Coding Practice folder. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an HTML file. So we're going to click on the icon New File, and most often we will title our initial HTML file index.html. So index.html, and hit enter, and it'll open up automatically for us. Okay, so here's our index.html file, and it's empty. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the feature on VS Code where we just type in HTML, and we get our little choice, menu choice, and we're going to hit the one with a 5. And now we have our boilerplate. So we'll change the title, and I'm going to say Coding Practice. And of course you can say whatever you want. Okay. And what I'd like to do next is I'm just going to minimize, go ahead and minimize this for a second so I can go back to my desktop. Now I'm going to go back to my folder, Coding Practice, and now you can see inside that I have a index.html file inside there. So if I open it up so we can see it, and so there's my index.html file, even though there's nothing in it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it, and I'm actually going to do it again. I'm going to click on it first. Now that it's selected, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say open with, it should give me some choices here. I can open up with Firefox, Google, Microsoft Edge. So I'm going to open it up with Google. Doesn't really matter. And that page is going to open up, but there's nothing in it yet because we haven't put anything in it yet. So it's just going to be in our local environment. This is on our own machine. It's like our local server. So this is how you can see everything that you're going to write. So what I'm going to do is just minimize it a little bit, just make it smaller. And then I'm going to close out this. And now I'm going to go back to my VS Code, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize this a little bit, just make it a little smaller so that I can see both screens. So I want to be able to see my code, and I want to be able to see the browser as well. And then we're going to start coding inside the body, and then we'll be able to refresh the browser and then see the output. Okay, so I'm in the body, so let's start with some basic HTML tags. So we're going to start with our header tags. Let's go ahead and start with all of our H1s. So what you'll do is you'll start with a less than, like that. and you'll say H1, and then you'll close it, and then automatically VS Code is going to give you your closing tag. So you have your H1 here, and then your closing H1, and then inside, the cursor's already inside it. So if you just hit enter, then you can see that you can put something inside the tag. Now another way to do it in VS Code is just type H1 and hit enter, and you get it. So you don't have to type all the little greater thans and less thans. So and you don't have to hit enter and separate them if you don't want to, especially for the H1s and H2s and stuff. You're not going to be putting a lot of text inside there, so I usually just leave it the way it is. So let's say my web page, and we can put anything we want in here. And then what I'd like you to do is save it. So you can either go up to File and Save, or it would be a lot easier just to hit Control S. So I'm hitting Control S, and now I'm going to go over here to my browser and refresh or reload the page, and now we see the output, my web page. All right, this is exciting. Okay, so let's keep going. Now I'm going to type H2 and hit enter, and I'm going to just write some text. This is an H2, and I'm going to hit Control S to save it, and then I'm going to refresh. And then you can see that this text is smaller than the H1 text. Now each browser has their own default styling. So Chrome is going to show this in a certain way, whereas if I had chosen Microsoft Edge, it might look different. It will probably look different. And then Firefox would look different, and every single type of browser is going to have their own default styling. We're going to be overriding all of that when we do our own CSS, and overriding some of it, if not all of it. So just wanted you to be aware of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do all of the different heading tags just to see the differences. So H3, and I'm going to write here's an H3, and then I'm not going to save it yet because I just want to do it first, and then we'll save it at the end. Let's do an H4, and we'll say hello, and then we'll do an H5, and we can say let's say hello world, something different, and then we'll do an H6, and that is it. Those are all of the different H's. Okay, this is it. Okay, now that I've done it, I'm just going to Control S and refresh. So you can see that they all get smaller and smaller as you get to the higher numbers. Okay, so you can choose different headers for this larger text. All right, so let's next do some other elements. So a very common element is a div element. A div element is a container. It's a common element that we use, and it can contain other elements. So let's go ahead and put it in. So div and hit enter, and then I'm going to hit enter again, and now I can kind of see my container. So inside of my div, I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of other elements in there. So let's do an H2, and I'm going to say what are divs, and then I'm going to do next an H5 just for fun. And inside there, I'm going to say divs are used. So I'm basically just going to be writing some text, but at least this text is helpful for you. So when you keep this code, you can refer back to it and to see what the definitions of different things are. So divs are used as containers. It seems like it's better than just making nonsensical paragraphs of stuff. So divs are used as containers for other HTML elements. and help us divide our page into sections. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control S and refresh. And then I can see that I have my div. All right, so there are a lot of other elements that are similar to divs in that they create containers and create sections for our page. And we have some of them are called there's one called section, there's one called article, one called a side. Divs are real common, but it's kind of nice to have the other ones just in case you want to, it's just helpful for you as the developer to see your code and divide your code into different things that are more useful for you. Okay, now why don't we do another one? Let's do a section tag. Section, and then inside our section, let's go ahead and practice doing some other elements. So I'm going to do a paragraph element. So P. And so this is going to be normal text. So I'm going to say this is a paragraph with normal sized text. Okay. And let's do some other ones. How about we try italic? I hit enter, and I'm going to write this is italic. Okay, and then I'm going to do another one called emphasis. EM is emphasis, and I'm going to say this is emphasized text. Okay, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go over here to my file icon, and I'm going to click it, and that's going to get rid of all the folders, and that way I can see more of my code, and it's just a little easier for us to manage. Next, I'm going to do strong. Strong is another element, and that is going to be bold text. So this element uses a bolder or stronger text. Okay. And then finally, what else should we use? Let's do bold. Let's do actual bold. B, there's one for bold. And see if that's different. This is bold text. Okay, so why don't we save and refresh and see what we can come up with here. All right, so we can see that we have our paragraph text, we have our italic, our emphasized, which look exactly the same to me, and then we have the strong and the bold, and again they look exactly the same as well. So there are different choices, but it seems like they're very similar. You might notice that if you look down the page, everything is, everything is right next to each other, like underneath each other. Everything just goes to the next line, next line, next line, next line, until we get here. Your italic and your emphasized are right next to each other, and your strong and your bold is right next to each other. If I expand this, again, these stay right next to each other. This is by default, these elements are called inline elements by default. So they're going to stay in line, whereas all the other ones are called block elements, which means they're going to go to the next line, next line, next line. So as you learn which ones are inline and which ones are block, it'll help you to decide what to do for your design as you're starting to design things. So quickly, if you were sitting here going, okay, yeah, I want to do some italics and stuff, but I want it to go to the next line, there's a couple different ways you could do it. One is to use CSS, but an easier way is to simply put a break in the ones that are inline. So for italic, I would just type BR and hit enter, and the text editor would give me my closing and my opening and closing tags or brackets, and a break is a single element. It doesn't have an opening and closing. It's just all by itself. And then if I do another break after my M, BR and hit enter, and then I do another one after my strong BR and hit enter, and then I do a final one after my bold BR and enter. So I've got these breaks. If I save it, it should and it will put these things on the next line. So let's see if I refresh, and then you can see that everything goes into the next line. All right, this is a good spot to stop and take a break.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, do give us a thumbs up and share it. Also check out amazing discounts and offers on our premium courses in the description below.